Hello fellow audio nerds, I'm Steph and this is Major Hi-Fi. This week I'm super excited to share with you the Noble Audio Sage. It was actually my first time listening to a Noble Audio IEM this week, and dang, they sound really good, they look really good too. So I'm very excited to share my time with you, and so yeah, let's go back in time and I'll show you my first impression, and then I will meet you right back here for the overall sort of thoughts on them. Alright, here we go. Hey everybody, Steph here. So I'm super excited because today I have with me the Noble Audio Sage, and I've actually never heard a Noble Audio product before ever, so I'm super excited to give them a listen. I know that people kind of rave about these things, so yeah, let's see first what's in the box. I should mention, this is the Noble Audio Sage, and the version that I have with me here today is the Wizard version. This means that the actual driver housing shell, the design on the outside, is custom. It's a one-off, and Noble Audio does this with these really pretty. Anyway, let's open it up and see what it looks like. Here we go. Okay, so I guess where do you even start here? So, two different cases here in the box. You've got this circle one here with the Noble Audio logo. It's hard plastic, and inside I've got some ear tips here. There's foam, there's silicone, there's 3 flange tips in there. Got a sticker, a little velvet drawstring pouch, and this little cute, oh my gosh, this little cute pelican case. It's just a tiny little cool thing. So yeah, let's see what's inside here. So here are the earphones. Got a couple of Noble Audio silicone straps. Carabiner, probably for this here case, warranty card. So I'm guessing that the Pelican case here is mostly for travel, so if you want to bring these on the road with you, pack them in your suitcase or something like that, you've got this super durable, sturdy case. If you're just carrying them around town, you could put it in the little sack, the little pouch, or the circular one. Wow. That is pretty. That is really pretty. I hope that you can see this okay. It's sort of like this blue stone looking material. I don't know, judging by pictures and stuff that I've seen online, these actually are smaller than I was expecting them to be, so that's kind of cool. And in comparison to the sort of more traditional Sage earphone, this Wizard Sage sort of has a rounder shape to it. It's got this glossy finish. I'd seen some of them online and they're just really pretty designs, so if you are kind of into a fancier, prettier looking IEM, you should definitely check these out, because honestly I haven't seen too many that rival the prettiness of these. Now this size, I would say it's like sort of a medium large, and just sort of looking at it, I'm very curious to see how these fit. The nozzles look a little bit wide. Yeah, these nozzles are large, and it kind of doesn't want to stay in my ear. I'm gonna try a few different ear tips. Here's my sort of thoughts on it so far. The nozzles are pretty large, so it kind of keeps wanting to pop out of my ear, but I did find a smaller tip that works well, and then I can definitely get a seal in there. It just is a little bit slippery. I feel almost certain that if you have a little bit larger ears, these are gonna work so much better for you, but I actually have pretty small ear canals, so I think that that's one little hiccup in it. Also, this cable is really interesting because the little stiff part here that I'll show you, just for example, the Shure has the same sort of idea, but this hook isn't malleable. You can't really straighten it out or move it around. It's sort of stuck in this shape, and I think that will also make it a little bit, it'll be really a person to person situation with whether or not these fit easily, or if you have to give it a little more time. But actually, once they're in the ear and sort of sealed, I'm also noticing a lot of sound isolation, so that's kind of cool. This cable's great. It's a really nice portable length. It's bundles of wire are individually insulated, braided together here. So yeah, it's got a nice sort of classy look to it. I like the little touch with the tiny logo. It's funny because yeah, these just have kind of an air of like classiness to them, and yet it's still like really, I don't know, at least like this particular design still has this sense of like masculinity that I think is it kind of like blends this masculine and feminine sort of look, and I really like that about them. So without further ado, I really want to take a listen because I know, I'm just excited to hear these things. So for this first impressions listening test, I'm just going to be listening with my phone, but throughout the week I will test it with different DACs, see how that sort of changes the sound. But for now, let's just see how they perform in general. Alright, so right off the bat here, I'm listening to a song called Roll With The Punches by Dawes, and the kick drum seems a little bit quieter in the mix. However, it still feels super punchy. I'm getting a sense that the transient response on this is like a seriously quick kind of transient response, and that makes that kick drum come through with a sense of punchiness and fullness, even though the lows aren't super emphasized. I'm also getting a sense that there's a lot of spaciousness around the low frequencies, and as a result of that, it's really providing a lot of energy to the groove in this song in particular. There's not a whole lot of other things going on in the mix in the low frequencies, but the kick drum really sort of has that spaciousness to like breathe and present itself. Oh wow, that is really pretty. So I'm listening to a song called So Tender by Keith Jarrett, and I have this overwhelming sense that there's definitely this like sort of high mid tilt and emphasis to these earphones, and as a result of that, I could hear so many of these little ghost notes in all of the instruments in that song, really, that I probably wouldn't hear as clearly otherwise, certainly not as clearly, if at all. So, for example, I can hear the finger noise and the fret noise on the bass guitar, and I hear all these little kind of twinkly, like, individual little brush hits with the snare and the cymbals from the drums. And then, of course, the piano, which the hammers come through with so much clarity that it's almost like a little bit like, I don't want to say harsh, but it's definitely like has more sort of precision and like exactness than it usually does. So the transient response in those high mids is real, and it really kind of, in this genre especially, is providing a sense of life and realness to this performance. And that mid-range feels harmonically rich. I say that there's sort of a tilt, but it, each sort of section of that mid-range feels even. It's just that the high mids have a little bit extra. So it's not like it's really changing the tonality too much. It's just sort of changing the level, if that makes sense. I am curious though how this will work with different genres, because with that song in particular, it's like there's so much to be had from those high mids. I'm curious about something that wants a little bit more heaviness. Let's see what it sounds like. Interesting. Yeah, I could definitely see. So I'm listening to a song called No Dad by Taylor Hollingsworth, and this song has, it's sort of like got this punky, garagey kind of sound to it. So it's got these electric guitars that are really dirty, and then the bass is also pretty heavily distorted. And really, because of this high mid tilt, most of the energy, the guitar, is coming from that graininess in the breakup of the amp, as opposed to sort of like the heaviness from it. And I miss that a little bit in that song. So I think that that's definitely telling, although there is still this immense sense of clarity, and I wonder if some folks might actually really like that with heavier music, like being able to hear the vocal and the guitars in this new sort of way. But for me, it felt like I wanted a little bit more body from it and less clarity, if that makes sense. I guess in general, I wanted to feel a little bit more moodiness from that song, and it just felt a little bit sterile to me. So let's move on to something else that might work here. Yes, wow. The high frequencies definitely kind of take on that sense of clarity as well, and they are emphasized, although it still feels very even, very harmonically rich. I was just listening to Erykah Badu's song Cleva, and her voice, oh my gosh, it sounded so close in the soundstage to me, and so very intimate. All of the sort of little raspy things that she sort of does this thing where she'll start with kind of a solid note, and then it dies to this little rasp in that song, and you can hear it so clearly, and it really sort of is very emotionally impactful and really nice. And that vocal and the vibraphone definitely come through perhaps a little bit higher in the mix than normal. And something else that is actually really interesting, there's definitely a sense of extension in the high frequencies, a lot of extension, and it actually is sort of affecting the width in this song as well, because there's this sort of wide panned bright synth thing that because of sort of the extra airiness on top, it really brings your ears way out here. Now the soundstage on these is very interesting. It is, it's really special actually. I was just listening to the song "Love Is a Wild Thing" by Casey Musgraves, and the thing that's so interesting about it is that anything that sort of falls into this high mid region is affected by that high mid kind of boost and that high mid tilt. Definitely seems to be closer in proximity in terms of the sense of depth. For example, in that song, it starts off with just the acoustic guitar, which, by the way, has the most beautiful, the transient response there. It feels like you're right next to the guitar player, basically. But additionally, that guitar and then the banjo that comes in a little bit later, they all feel very kind of up close and right next to the vocal. The vocal's pretty dry there, so I think that it's partially intentional from the mix, but it definitely feels closer than normal. But then when everything else comes in, you start to really get this sense of depth, because the other instruments that don't have that high mid, sort of a lot of high mid energy to begin with, start to fill in the rest of that depth. It was really interesting in particular listening to the drums, which, the snare drum definitely kind of pops forward a little bit. It's got more high mid energy than the rest of the kit, and so that kind of creates this sort of, it's really aesthetically pleasing, but definitely interesting. And like I said, there's a really awesome sense of extension from the high frequencies, which really affects the height experienced with these earphones as well. And likewise, there's also a really great sense of width, and I think part of that is just the transient response is so ridiculously active that it really creates an active soundstage. It moves around with you, and it doesn't really stay in one place, unless I guess if the instruments themselves are so static. But especially for live music, music made with sort of real instruments, acoustic instruments, yeah, it's really quite stunning actually. I'm going to spend some more time with this, take it around with me this week, and I'm looking forward to experimenting a little bit, see what else these sort of work with, what they don't work with, and I'll meet you back over at Major Hi-Fi for my final thoughts. Alright, here we go. Overall, the low frequencies of the Noble Audio Sage are quick and tight. And although they're level in comparison to sort of the high-mid tilt, the high-mid boost, is sort of modest, they actually are quite effective because there's a lot of space around them. Additionally, they're really even, and they take EQ super well. So if you're the type of person that listens to a very wide range of genres, and you're hoping that your earphone will take EQ well so that you can sort of adjust for, you know, your different moves and preferences for those genres, then this is a really good option actually, because it will take, especially in the low end, giving it a little boost with EQ sounds really good, really natural. The mid-range of these earphones definitely emphasizes the high mids, and as a result, it sort of works very well for certain genres and not as well for other genres. If there was a spectrum with one side being body and one side being clarity, these would definitely fall more toward the side of clarity, where if you're listening to a genre that needs a lot of body and wants a lot of sort of thickness to it, these won't really be the ones for you. However, if you're listening to a genre that wants just more clarity and sort of precise detail, especially in the high frequencies and the high mids, then these will be the ones for you. To the high frequencies, there's a bit of emphasis there, although it doesn't feel like a certain frequency is boosted way up. It sort of feels even in general, and as a result, you really get sort of a nice sense of like realism, a nice sense of larger than life in the high frequencies. There's a distinct sense of extension here, and that not only contributes to the soundstage as a whole, you know, the height and the width actually, but the thing that I actually love the most about that high frequency extension is the way that it interacts with vocals. So much more emotion than normal can actually come through with these because of the way that the voice becomes texturized by that high frequency information. So I would say that especially if you like to listen to music where the vocal is the center point, and that is the most important thing, and that's what is driving the emotional energy of the song, then this will really enhance your experience there. I really didn't hear any sibilants, and the only place where it sort of bothered me at all was just in overly bright mixes or mixes that had a bit of harshness to them anyway. And in that sort of example, then I'd probably want to EQ these a little bit. The soundstage of these earphones have a prominent sense of height and width, and I think so much of it really has to do with that high frequency extension, which just adds so much. Additionally, I think the transient response really affects that soundstage as well, because, for example, if you're listening to an acoustic guitar, the way that those sort of transients come through so incredibly clearly, it really sort of makes it feel like it's moving air, like you're sitting right in front of it. This sensation is better or worse for different genres, and that actually brings me now to the sense of depth with these, because the sense of depth was really, really interesting. It definitely had a sense of depth, and it definitely, kind of followed the mix in putting instruments back in space. However, it was a little unusual in that because of the high-mid tilt, certain instruments sort of stepped a little bit closer to you than they might otherwise. However, because of the sort of shape of the mid-range, reverbs also come through very quickly. So I would say if you have a reverb that's a plate or something like that, where it's sort of it's not supposed to necessarily replicate a room, you'll have the sensation of a voice being very close and then this reverb sort of letting it draw back in space. However, if there's an instrument, a guitar for example, I heard this a lot when I was listening through some Pine Grove tunes, but if you have an electric guitar, for example, that has a room mic or has sort of a more realistic sounding reverb to it, that reverb comes through very clearly and will actually push that a little bit further back in space. So anyway, it's sort of versatile, but it's also plays with the mix in a really interesting way. Overall, these earphones really work the best with genres that want a sense of clarity over a sense of heaviness. And as a result, I thought these were great for singer-songwriter type of stuff. I also found that for jazz, sometimes it worked really, really well, depending on the jazz, I guess, and depending on the roles of the instruments in that song. It also worked well for classical, but again, if you're looking for something that wants like a very, very thick heaviness to it, then these won't be the ones for you. Thanks for watching. For more information on the Noble Audio Sage, be sure to check out the description box. I will leave a link there with my colleague's review of these earphones. And if you made it all the way to the end of this video, please give it a thumbs up. And for more videos like this, be sure to subscribe. Alright everybody, thank you very much, and I'll see you next time. Bye.